CPOV. CertainPOV.com.
Before we get started, I just want to give a special thank you and shout out to our podcast network, Certain POV. You can find us and all their other awesome shows at certainpov.com. That's CERTAINPOV.com.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to How the Fuck, the talk show turned podcast where we chat with folks who know what the fuck they're doing and ask them how the fuck they got there. I'm your host, Katie DeMatteis.
I'm also your host, Ben Martin Mooney.
And I'm your thirdliest host, Zeki Alakaya.
Today, we have the privilege of chatting with James Tucker, a producer, director, and animator whose work has significantly impacted the world of animation, particularly within the DC universe. James' creative vision has been instrumental in bringing to life many beloved series and movies such as Batman Beyond, Justice League, and Batman the Brave and the Bold.
So, James, how the fuck?
Yeah. How the fuck did I get here? Okay. It started in a small town called Gary, Indiana. Now, I was born in I'm a Midwesterner who was obsessed with Batman as a child. Drew him all the time. That's probably the earliest thing I ever drew. And then through that show, the Adam West Batman show, I got attracted to comic books and animation, and I just drew all the time. And it was at the time, I guess as a kid, I don't say it was a dream. It was a passion that I just kept drawing Batman, thinking someday that I might do comics. You know, that was, if there was a goal, it was to do comics, but at the very least to get paid to draw. So I kept doing it, but the trajectory wasn't a straight line. Didn't live anywhere near Southern California where they made cartoons. Ended up moving from Indiana to Tennessee, which was even a further step back, but eventually kept drawing, did well in my art classes, was known as an artist. I self-described as an artist. I knew that's what I wanted to do in some form or fashion. It was really just survive drawing, survive through art. Anyway, by any means necessary. So, but animation was far on the horizon. In the back of my head, I wanted it. I wanted to do it. I thought I could do it, but I didn't know how. We're talking the early to mid 80s at this point, where I'm in school and stuff. So, this was before the Disney Renaissance of Little Mermaid and all that. And, animation back then was a seasonal job, and you just worked on crappy Saturday morning cartoons and saved your money, and then you were unemployed for 6 months out of the year. And then, so the prospects weren't good. But in the early 90s, I got a bug up my butt to go. Well, I was sick of Nashville. I was in Nashville, and I just had to get out. And I was like, I'm just going to move back to the Midwest. In Chicago, I had family there and friends, and I was like, I don't care what I do in Chicago. And my plan was to work for Crown Books, which thank God that didn't happen. But long story short, I read a article about a animation studio in a small town outside of Chicago called Star Tunes. Well, the studio was called Star Tunes. The town was called Homewood. I cold called them. And said, do you need anybody to do animation? And they're like, sure. Bring your portfolio by tomorrow. Well, I didn't have a portfolio. Didn't think that through. So I literally spent the night drawing a portfolio.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, I even painted cells on the back of acetate sheet dividers that used to come in your book reports and stuff, and I used like acrylic paints or something not the way they do cells at all. I show up the next day, and had I known they were going to hire me if I could hold a pencil, I would have saved the
You wouldn't have worked so hard.
I was like, oh, I just have to be able to hold a pencil. They were going to hire me. They were desperate. So, but no, they, and so I really started it now, hadn't had any education really in animation at all. But I could draw. And really, I tell people all the time, if you really want to get in animation, that's a prerequisite. And so I learned from the ground up. They started me out, painting mats. This is long before digital stuff they can do now easily. We had to do by hand, like hold out mats for camera effects. Anyway, I got in there and I worked from the ground up. They shortly after I was hired on, they hired some more people and they got this big contract to work on the first season of Animaniacs, which was at the early
That's
90s.
cool.
Huge show, and we were a small studio that they outsourced to, so that was a connection to Los Angeles. And from there, I just learned, and I'll take a breath and let you ask some more stuff, but but this
That's
is before
awesome.
I came out here. This is before the DC stuff.
Yeah, that's so cool, and it's always so interesting to hear sort of like the way that people are able to just be like, I'm just gonna cold call and I'm gonna stay up all night drawing and cross my fingers, and then it leads to this incredible career doing huge projects and like really making a name for yourself in the industry.
Well, yeah.
So say to that point, you have been involved in just a huge array of projects from superheroes to comedy. Do you have a specific project that stands out to you as particularly memorable or meaningful?
Well, I mean, for me, the thing that's closest to my heart, and like you said, I haven't worked on, I can only count on half a finger how many things I worked on over the last 30 years that I just couldn't stand.
That's good. That's great.
I mean, and there are not many people in animation, I think, who can say that. But, I was very, blessed and lucky about that. But I mean, the thing personally I'm proudest of and poured my heart most into was Brave and the Bold, Batman the Brave and the Bold, because that was, I had worked on Batman shows before. Like I had worked on not the original Batman the Animated Series, but they did a 4th season of that after I had moved out here. My first job out here was I got a gig on Superman the Animated Series as a character designer, and that was my first job. I mean, Bruce Timm hired me, and I was started out as a character designer, which was actually lower than what I had been doing on Animaniacs. Because I was a full animator, but they didn't. The thing I learned when I came out to LA was that they don't really do animation in the States at the time. They didn't. So we were an anomaly in Chicago. The fact that we were doing episodic animation in this small, studio outside of Chicago, that was not the norm. There weren't other studios like us. Everything else was in, overseas in Korea and other places. So the only job I could get as a newbie coming to LA was a character designer, which is actually my preference. I love doing that. It's just not the highest paying gig you can get in animation. So I was like, okay, I loved it though. And I've yet to stop doing it. I mean, the thing I'm on now, even though I'm a co-producer, I still do character design because I love it.
That's
but anyway,
awesome.
I'm getting all off the track. But yeah, Brave and the Bold was the thing I've done that I loved. I just poured myself into because it was right up my alley. They told me I could go as campy and as broad and as Adam Westy as I wanted.
That's great.
And that it was like a job I had been prepping for all my life since birth because I knew exactly how to make that show. And my first Batman comic was Brave and the Bold. So it was just like,
there you go.
It was,
Full circle.
it was crazy. It just was so, And plan.
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I said, no, it's not like it was planned. It wasn't like a foregone conclusion. It just,
sure.
life is funny. I mean, I would have definitely enjoyed the ride a lot more if I'd known things were going to work out.
That's very real.
Like,
That's a fair point.
I was so angst-ridden and nervous, and I just didn't enjoy it as much. But anyway,
I was actually going to say this question isn't on our list of questions, but I realized that people who are outside of the creative industries don't necessarily know what each individual role does. And I'm curious if you could describe in your words what a producer is and what a producer does.
well, I mean, that it depends on the production, really. There is no one catch-all, because you'll see a show, and I can only really speak for animation, but I'm pretty sure live action has this same issue where you'll see like 10 producers on something, and only one or two of them have any creative input in what you saw on the screen. So there's producers, the creative producers who basically run the production, and some of them have input into the writing, others do or don't. From the things I've worked on, and I started working with Bruce Timm when I came out here, and he was at the time a rare thing, which was an artist producer, meaning it's the normal way things were done is that cartoons were written. They were written before any visualization was applied to them, especially in television animation. And so if you worked on a crew, even if you were a producer, you got a script, and you didn't really have input into what that script was or why or how. And so there was a lot of writer-driven shows prior to Bruce Timm. And I want to say this was around the same time John Kay was doing his thing. The Cartoon Network was coming into its own later in the 90s. Nickelodeon, the idea of an artist-driven show where the creative was coming from the visual side first, or being led by that, was rare. So as far as that word goes, it used to be just producer. I used to be just a co-producer, then a producer. Then they tacked on executive producer. I don't know why. It didn't change the job description or the income. So I'm like, I'm still doing the same job.
But it sounds so cool.
And sometimes they give you a producer credit to somebody that they want to bump up, but because of pricing, everything is priced out. Like every role has a price to it. So if you're doing one thing, they want to give you a raise, but they can't. They will make you a producer.
Oh, interesting.
So that they can but you're still basically doing the. So I don't know. To answer your question, it doesn't mean shit.
That's a good answer. I like it.
It's a phenomenal answer.
It depends on the production. It depends on the studio and what their own internal rules are. It sucks because some producers do a lot, and the show wouldn't be the show that people enjoy without that person. Because like in animation, the writers and the directors get the lion's share of credit if something's good. Rarely if it sucks, I've noticed, but they get the credit, but yet the producer is giving notes on every script. I mean, on Brave and the Bold, I co-wrote a lot of stuff, meaning my co-producer who handled the story stuff, the writing stuff, he would get the script in, we'd give notes, he'd apply the notes, he'd send it out again to get rewritten, it'd come back, he'd make some corrections, but then he'd give it to me and say, you want to put your zhuzh on it? And so, I mean, I like alliteration. I like corny puns. Like a lot of the things that made Brave and the Bold feel like it did generated from me wanting to set the tone. I guess that's the thing that most a creative producer does, is they're the keeper of the tone. Like they're the one that pulls everything in, so that, because you have all these different people working on this show. Some of them work on it regularly and they know what you want. Other people only work on it sporadically, like we freelance writing. And so it's up to the co-producer or story editor to pull it into the style of the show. And in lieu of that, I was also the last say, as far as going over everything and saying, okay, this fits, this works with what we've already done, this works with where we want to go. So I guess they're the shepherd of the crew.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I mean, yes, it is. I won't be an ingrate and say it's not fun.
Every job
it's
sucks
fun to be in
sometimes.
control. Yeah. And I mean, even though by and large it's a lot of work, but when it's work that you are in control of, and you actually get to see the fruits of your frustration actually end up in the final product, it makes it, I won't say all worthwhile, but because, it's time consuming, it's very stress inducing. A lot of people who produce get worn down by it, especially in animations.
I have seen that, certainly, but that, yeah.
I am curious. We kind of left off, and then it kind of picked up again. Like you're in Chicago, you're working on Animaniacs, and then you came to LA as a character. Gosh, what was the word? Character
Designer.
Designer. There's the word.
Mm-hmm.
Working with Bruce Timms. How did that happen? Like, was he somehow involved with Animaniacs, or did you know somebody who was, and like pick you up from that? How did you end up in LA?
Oh, in LA. Okay, so we're in Chicago. We got the contract for the first season of Animaniacs, and that was 10 episodes. And so that went from, I guess I started at around 91, and then that went through till 93.
Okay.
At that point, they hadn't renewed Animaniacs, and so with the contract being up for the studio, we all got laid off. And with the promise of more to come possibly, but it was going to take a while. And in the meantime, certain people from the studio were the pioneers who had trekked out to LA and instantly got gigs just from having the practical experience we got from working in that studio. We knew because the average person coming out of a school going into animation doesn't have practical work experience. They have, lessons they've done, but they haven't actually done anything that has seen the screen on a weekly basis like, a regular show was. So we had that was kind of our trial by fire. So any one of us who left that studio came out here and instantly got a job. I was one of the last holdouts because I really didn't think I'd like LA. And for the first 10 years, I was right. But I did not like it. I mean, I'm a Midwesterner / Southerner through and through. I mean, mentally, and I feel more at home in that area. But I've been here 30 years, so who says? But anyway, so most everyone else had come out here. The people who were going to come out here had come out here. I was a holdout. And I also had another gig that brought me out here on a business trip. And I thought, what the hell? I'll call up some of my coworkers from, Startoons who had gotten gigs at Warner Brothers, because I had heard about the Superman show Bruce Timm was doing after Batman the Animated Series had wrapped up. I was like, well, and this is so unlike me. I don't know where I got the cojones to do this, but I called up my friend who I'd worked with, and I said, they were doing Looney Tunes commercials. This is the mid-'90s now. And I was like, I don't want to do that again, but I would love to get an interview with Bruce Timm. They said, well, we'll try to arrange that. So come by the studio. So this happened right as I was, the day before I got on my plane. So I get on the plane, go there, get a rental car, and take the rental car straight to Warner Brothers. So unheard of. And, go up there. My friend says, okay, calls Bruce up. It was he hadn't started up Superman yet, but he was crewing up. So there was no one up there with him. He was in an office pretty much by himself. My friend walks me up to the door, doesn't introduce me, just says good luck and walks off.
Oh my God.
And so I have to go in. And now, again, all the stuff that is in my portfolio to this point is all funny animal stuff. I've told the story a million times, but it is what happened. But the night or the couple of days before I was going out, I said, what do I need to do? Because I have nothing to show. At this point, I didn't even know I was going to meet the man. But I said, well, what would I... So I basically drew 2 pages of doodles in Bruce Timm's style, what I thought was his style. And I filled 2 pages up. And I stuck them in the back of my portfolio. And I'm meeting him. I go in, knock on his door. He's like, come in, and he's going through my portfolio. And as I assumed, he was like, because it was all funny animal stuff. Like there was nothing in there that told him I could do the job he needed me to do. Mm-hmm. Until he hit those pages of doodles. And he stopped on that. He's like, huh. And now that I've known him all these years, when he goes, "Huh, you're in."
That's cool.
He's like, "So when do you want to start?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in Chicago now." He's like, "Well, let's say October." This was July, so he said October, and that gave me October, from July to October to get my affairs in order and move out to LA on my own dime. It was a huge undertaking, and I got so far in debt for that, but it worked out. But so that's how I got in with him, and and I stuck to him like glue. So.
Wow, that's you and this like coming in right under the radar, like right in the nick of time, or that's pretty incredible.
I'll say this: my timing has generally been pretty good, and when it wasn't good, the repercussions weren't horrible.
That's very fortunate.
I've been through some shit. I won't say I haven't, but all in all, everyone has their trials. But as far as again, I had no conscious plan of this. It was just a passion, and I always think if you have a burning passion, it is kind of like an inner compass. It will guide you towards something, or at least it will guide you away from shit you don't want to do or don't think. I don't know. I can only speak for myself. I shouldn't make that a truism for everybody, but it's just that's what happened with me. It's everyone, and the thing I know is everyone in animation for the most has a different story about how they got in.
I will say though, one of the things that has been sort of a through line with a lot of the folks that we've talked to is something similar in terms of just having like an internal sense of like what it is that they needed to do, sort of like a drive in that general direction. Whether they refer to it as like their passion being sort of a compass, or sort of like like a pull in a general direction. Like there is a consistent thread of that being the case through a lot of the interviews that we've had. So it's very interesting that you also are mentioning that. Because it seems like such a common thing where folks are like, look, I love this thing so much that I just I pursued it, and it's worked out, which is really incredible.
Because conversely, there are people I know in animation who either lived out here, like it wasn't that hard for them to get in. They were talented, but it wasn't their burning passion. And while on the outside, everyone thinks, oh, it must be great to work in animation. If that's not your dream or your goal or your passion, it can be torture. I mean, I see people who are angst-ridden over feeling they're frittering away their talents working in animation. It's not an individualistic business. It's a team effort. I mean, nothing you see on screen got up there because one guy was doing it by himself, everything. I mean, the vision might be in total, but along the way, there were compromises. You have to get people on board. You have to guide them toward what you want, but then you also have to be willing to let them contribute. So it's never, it takes I hate to say this, takes a village, but it's a cliche, but it's true for animation for sure. Or any production, I think, any big art undertaking that's a creative endeavor that you've got hundreds and almost thousands of people involved. So.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you also mentioned sort of like having seen some shit, and maybe, I don't know if you're referring necessarily to professional or personal stuff, but I am curious, like the entertainment industry as a whole is very competitive. Animation, it has the potential to be. It seems like maybe it's sort of changed over time, but I'm curious if there have been significant obstacles, or maybe you're referring to that just a moment ago. And how you've like navigated that, and maybe how it's impacted your work, or how you've sort of overcome them long term.
Well, the obstacles I was speaking of were more personal things. I wouldn't just challenges. I would call them challenges, not so much obstacles, but as far as the career in animation, it wasn't, again, like I said, I once I started working with Bruce Timm, I knew I was equated to, okay, there's a kid on your street who has all the cool toys. Are you gonna, but they're a cool kid too. And he's like, well, I'll just stick with them. they have the best toys, they get to play with them, and the ones they don't want, I get. You know, that's
It's a good
kind of
deal.
what it was like. You know, and not in general. You know, I broke off eventually and did my own stuff. I mean, Brave and the Bold, Legion of Superheroes. I did like 21 DTV movies from 2012 through 2019. 2020 was the last one that came out. So I've done a shit ton of work on my own. So, but again, the DC, you know, and I was a huge DC fan. So it was like, I didn't want to go anywhere. Like I wasn't lured away to Marvel. Like I was never tempted to do that. I don't know. I career-wise, I can't say I've faced too many obstacles. You know,
That's
I mean,
great.
again, my love, what I consider success for me, you know, by Hollywood standards, is kind of low on the. I won't even say low on the totem pole. We're in the under the ground in the foundation, like it's television animation. You know, we're not Pixar. Although I would say we reach as many people or more as a movie would. We're cranking this shit out, you know, for weekly consumption. I mean, back when I started, it was daily consumption. You were doing 65 episodes that got stripped, and kids watched it every day. So, you know, a lot of people saw the stuff I did. And also my temperament is I couldn't work on a feature film that takes up to 3 years from development. And, you know, they throw away so much of what you do. You know, television is suited to my personality. It's like, you give it your best shot, and then you move to the next episode. You know, some will be great, some will be, you know, not as great, but you still you're right onto the next one, and that suits my personality. So, you know, I can't speak for what people trying to get in the industry now. I feel for the ones who went into a lot of debt, you know, going to schools and stuff, because no one makes a lot of money in their first animation gig. You know, I mean, I kind of, you know, this is my own personal opinion. I just think animation schools are a big scam because they're expensive. Unless you get a scholarship, then God bless you, you know. But boy, to spend money getting in debt when really just if you're really super talented, and the timing's right, because the thing with animation is there's highs and lows. We're kind of going through a low, a low point now because the streamers are reorganizing, they're consolidating and contracting. But 2 years ago, leading into the pandemic, it was go, go, go. And it was the same when I got in the business. It was right around Lion King had come out. And every studio, this is way before streaming, but every studio was building up a feature film division, syndication. Syndicated cartoons became a big deal. You know, it wasn't just relegated to Saturday morning like it had been. Suddenly, there was this need for a lot of content in a very short amount of time. And again, they were hiring people who could hold a pencil. But then again, I saw that contract, and it was about getting in sometimes is easier than staying in, because you have to in that time when it's go, 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 you have to establish a reputation that will keep you in when things get tight. You know, it's like, and they always get tight. Everything goes up and comes down. And animation seems to be always the first one to get slammed when the contraction hits.
So you did mention some trials of your life being more personal and with a high profile nature of everything that you've worked on throughout the years. I mean, we're talking about Justice League. We're talking about Batman. Some of the biggest names you can think about in drawn media. And I guess, how did you manage that balance between the professional self and your personal life? Especially considering all of the media coverage of these shows with conventions, interviews, panels, and, you know, work, that little thing. Whether it was as big in the past as it may be presently, as a producer, that can't be easy. I know there's a lot wrapped in there. How did you end up balancing all of that?
Poorly.
That's a great answer.
It's a very relatable answer.
That's it. I mean, I don't want to get in the weeds, but yeah, I could have done better. I think a lot of people can, and I know most people, because it consumes you, and it's like, it's not it consumes you. It's not a job you stop thinking about when you leave the office. It's a creative job. It's creative. So you're thinking, besides just the administrative stuff, like problems with your crew or difficult people you have to deal with, or some exec who's, giving you the blues, then you're supposed to go home and forget all that and deal with whoever is at home, if they're at home. It's tough. I mean, and a lot of people, it's not a news story, but people have to learn a life balance. And I think the people I know who seem to manage it better, this is a judgment call, but they don't live for the job. They're good at their job. They're talented, but they're technicians, meaning they know how to do what they need to do to get a job done, but they're not sweating it out. Their validation doesn't come from that job. Whereas I think a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, I mean, I validated myself based on the fact that I had gotten that job. I got that thing I really wanted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a trap a lot of people can fall into. And you hopefully you realize it before you're too far gone. But it can, there is definitely, and the studios and the people you work for do not give a shit about you achieving that balance, because you're they're getting what they need out of you. So and I'm not bitter about that at all. It's not like it's just a wry acknowledgement that's you don't get anything for nothing. Mm-hmm. And so there's prices to pay, and there's deals to be made with your eternal soul.
And there are only so many directions you can pull yourself at any given time. So that does make a lot of sense.
And I'll say, no regret. I mean, I wouldn't have changed anything, really. So I can't say I regret anything.
Good. Yeah. That's awesome. And I mean, and you get really amazing products at the end to show for all the blood, sweat, and tears as well when you're in a creative field, which is great as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm curious, and I like asking this to people who have done multiple things, right? Like directing, producing, drawing. How do each of those roles, or having done those things on various projects, how do they inform each other? I mean, they are products as well, yes. But how does having been on the side where you're actually sitting down, pen to paper, how does that inform the way that you look at a project? God, I did it again. A project when you're producing or directing, and vice versa.
Well, I think knowing, like I was going over a script earlier today, and I was reading it going, okay, if we do this equates to this many designs that have to be generated. This equates to how much I can look at a script and kind of guesstimate what the labor will go into it, and I can make a judgment call on whether that thing is worth doing or not. And if it's not worth doing, I'll say, pull this back, make it simplified, cut out these scenes, So having worked on, you learn how to, because I've done, I've done character design, I've animated, I've storyboarded. I know the amount of work that can go into something. Now, every artist is different. I happen to be what I consider, and what I've seen, on the faster side, mainly because I have a short attention span, a little on the ADHD spectrum.
That's so real.
You're in very good company.
So I'm, I have to do, that's why I'm in television. But I having done those jobs, each job piggybacks onto the other. And so having done all that other stuff, I know what a lot of producers might not know is looking at something and saying, oh, this equates to this amount of work. But they're different, when I'm drawing on my own, or just drawing for fun, or even drawing for work, it's a different I don't put that in my head. There were times when even though I was a producer on my own stuff, I would contribute to other shows if I liked the project. I'd storyboard a sequence here or there just to say I was a part of this production, because I love it all. And when I'm doing that for someone else, I put my own producer hat away a little bit. I just gotta work from my own, energy. I can't shortchange myself or second guess myself because I know what I'm drawing will cost. I let the guy who's actually getting paid to produce the thing I'm helping him out on, that's their problem. So I can divide up my attention that way.
Very cool.
That sounds very helpful to being able to just sort of like handle the thing and not worry about all the other stuff.
Yeah, there's an element of compartmentalization that I think you have to have especially television. We don't get to be artistes in television. We're not Pixar. We don't get to look at no one's sending us to China to research the Ming Dynasty or anything for a feature film that's going to take 5 years to do. And that could be any of my. I wasn't thinking one in particular. But anyway, yeah. So I don't know if I answered it. But.
No, I think you did. You definitely answered the question. And I always think it's interesting because some people, it's like I'm always thinking in all of the different ways because I'm just seeing this project holistically. And some people, it's like, when I take a certain role, I'm in that role. So I love hearing everyone's responses to that.
Yeah, and everyone does it differently or feels differently about it. I mean, I know people who become producers who would never work on anybody else's stuff after that, or go. Basically, I would be a character designer on a project just to be a part of the project if I really loved it, and I had the time. If it wasn't taking away from what I was actually getting, really doing. But I just love all this. I love a lot of the characters. I love being able to work on certain projects, even if they're not my own project. It's just
that makes sense to me.
Cool. I have sort of shifting gears a little bit because you've already kind of touched a little bit on like people have this idea of what working animation is like, and it's not necessarily what it is generally conceived to be.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in the superhero genre. I'm curious if there are any misconceptions that you see as being sort of predominant in like the general psyche that you could dispel or feel like or maybe important for people to know, hey, it looks like A, but in fact it is not, it is B, or F.
Yeah. Well, this kind of piggybacks on the thing I was saying earlier about being able to look at a script and see what it will cost, not in dollars and cents, but just in manpower or people power. To that point, there's a lot of there are a lot of ideas about animation, like, oh, you're drawing it, so your mind, it's limitless what you can come up with, and I'm like, no, there's very much a limit. It depends on the project, but a lot of people have been made to think that you have so much more leeway in animation to do these other things that live action couldn't do because it's cost prohibitive. Well, everything you see on screen has a cost, even, a animated thing. And there is a limit. There is, and that's what a producer has to think about, is the limit. It's something we're constantly fighting against, even with writers and things, people who come into the business who haven't had practical experiences, that they think, oh, you can do anything you want. And it's like, no, there are humans who have to do that. The thing you thought up in 10 minutes may take hundreds of people 8 months to do in reality, because it is limited. You're limited by your budget and your time. If you don't have a lot of both of those, you need to compress your expectations. What else? I mean, people say it's fun. And yeah, I would say it beats bagging groceries. Well, is that even a job anymore? I don't know. I guess everything's delivered now. But it's sure, to somebody it's a great job, but there's people in the gig who might not love it. So it's very a personal thing. For me, it was the best job I could get because I can't do much else. Like, I don't know what would have happened to me if this hadn't worked out. I shudder to think. I don't have any clue what I would have done as a human and an adult. Sort of.
I love
no
the
one's an adult.
Right. I mean, I purposely lean toward things where I wouldn't have to be an adult. I mean, it's like, what's the job that I can be the most childish at and get rewarded for that? No, See, again, I'm putting out a stereotype about animation. It's not like that at all. Especially at Warner's.
And I mean, I think at the end of the day, work is work, no matter if the work is creative or not. It's still a job.
Yeah, yeah, and you want, I mean, it's like any other job. It's, you have to look out for yourself. You look out for your own best interest, and people think, oh, well, it's such a fun job that they can, there is an element of people, if you're not careful, can take advantage of your being willing to do this. The whole thing where you're like, oh, I'd do that for free. Well, sure, you can think that, but I would never, don't say that in a meeting. Because I'll take you up on it.
Oh, you're free? Great. Here you go. That's yours.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they'll ask you to do a lot. Yeah. So you have to be careful about that. But yeah, I don't know. It's so funny because, again, I had no prior knowledge about what real animation was. I didn't go to school for it. I just knew what I liked watching on TV. And so I just kind of fell into it truly as a worker bee. I had no illusions about being the next, Andrew Staten. I mean, who's a Pixar director? Just pick one. Or Brad Bird. I just wanted to get paid to draw.
Nailed it.
to draw things I want. Yeah, I mean, when I first got started after school, I was drawing shoe ads. I mean, that was a stable job back in the late 80s.
Sure.
Literally not taking pictures of shoes. Some poor sap had to draw a shoe. And I was that poor sap for about a couple of months. So, yeah, I mean, yeah.
So if there are other poor saps that would like to carve out a career in animation and entertainment, what other advice could you expand upon? You mentioned a few things we just talked about, but is there any emphasis on things like drawing, maybe? Is there anything else outside of passion and interest and the ability to learn? And, is there anything else that you would say is, the biggest piece of advice you can give?
Well, I would say feed yourself in other things besides cartoons. I mean, if you like art, like a lot of different types of art, because it's basically an arsenal you can pull from, because certain things are in fad now. Like, I'll just use this as an example, but it's not exclusive to that. A lot of people have peaked in anime. Like we see a lot of new artists who have been weaned on anime, and that's their passion. That's what got them into the thing. And there are now jobs where having that influence will help you, because people, there are now showrunners and producers who come from that background, but that's not going to stay the norm forever. So you need to have, for versatility, that's the other thing. In animation, there's a rare instance where you can do one thing and people will keep wanting you to do that same one thing. If you have a certain style or something that's really strong. I'm using Bruce Timm. He and John Kay at the time, and a couple of other guys in the 90s revolutionized animation, because they brought back principles that had kind of fallen by the wayside, and as far as structure and the way, like cartoony cartoons, like Ren and Stimpy. Before that, you had the Care Bears. Animation was pretty lame. And so,
I'm sorry, you don't love the Care Bears?
Right. Well, some people liked it, but it was just, there was a cookie cutter element to animation in the coming off the 70s and the 80s. And, guys like John Kay and Bruce Timm exploded that up. Like they made cartoons that could have artistic integrity, and they kind of pulled that back. So where now you get all kinds of different styles and influences, but currently anime is kind of taken off as a big influencer. And there's all kinds of anime. I only use that as a temporary example, but it's just to say, don't let that be your only influence. Develop tastes in other things, read books, actually read, look at other kinds of movies besides the, superhero movies or whatever, if you're interested in superheroes. Because the thing I was very struck by when I got my job out here is I worked with these hugely talented people. And the thing was, I was used to being before I got in animation with, this group of people, I was used to being considered, the really good guy who could draw. But when you come out here, well, even in Startoons, you're just another one of the guys who can draw. You're supposed to draw. That's the bare minimum of what gets you in the door. So you have to feed yourself with other things to bring, which develop your taste. Because at the end of the day, if you move up the chain, it's your level of taste. And granted, that's up for people's own opinions, but you need to, develop a taste about things, know what's good and bad, and just fill yourself up with more influences than just the one narrow thing that you're into.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So in the creative industry, especially, but truthfully in kind of any facet of life, dealing with criticism, rejection, feedback, that is just such an integral part of the creative process. How do you handle negative feedback and rejection, and what advice would you give to other people who maybe need some help managing criticism constructively?
Well, how I handle it, I never let them see me sweat about it. I would stay off your Twitter, X, whatever the hell it is called this week. I don't read your press. I mean, this is what I would tell people, and I know a few people who actually do it. I'm not one of them. So all I do is just mutter "fuck you" off under my breath a lot.
Fair and valid.
Or block if I don't like. I'm like, I don't like that opinion. You're dead to me. That's kind of it. I'm very thin-skinned, as a lot of people are. I mean, anyone who says they're not or don't have the potential to be, you're either very so arrogant and sure of yourself, which there aren't that many people in this town like that. But I don't know anyone who just rolls off their back. People, you wouldn't be in this gig if you had some level of sensitivity. But at the end of the day, I always say, and I tell people on my crew, if, something we did gets kind of trounced or something, which doesn't happen often. I mean, I don't try to read that stuff. I'm like, okay, you got to do this. This was you got to do it. That person who on the computer didn't, and you're going to get to do something else, and it's a truism. Nobody willingly signs up to do something bad and all that time and money and effort to, everyone goes into things with a desire to make something decent, at least.
I really love the just muttering "fuck you" the whole time underneath that.
Better than crying, which is what I do when I get negative.
I don't know. I don't cry. No. Well, because they're wrong. If they were right, you cry. They're wrong.
Just like, someone doesn't like me. This is so sad.
Well, I will say that's the one good thing about being a producer is it's very rare that you don't get the credit, but you often don't get the blame either.
That's fair. You're like, no, this is everybody else's fault. I had nothing to do with it.
Right. Yeah.
That director, just terrible.
So while on topic of sort of engaging with people, particularly, like keyboard warriors, every fandom is a little bit different. And you've worked on some extremely beloved characters. Yeah. So I'm curious, how do you approach interacting with your audience, and in what ways have those interactions, if at all, maybe influenced or changed your approach to projects?
Well, I try not to let it get into my head, because once you're second guessing yourself based on, a comment or something, or even a prevalent opinion, because you can read the same criticism over and over and think and you can trick yourself into thinking it's a universal opinion, when by and large, the people who actually like stuff are quiet because they got their money's worth. Yep. And everyone has and also percentage wise, it's not like everyone's online. You know, and I think about myself when I was a little opinionated bastard. I was like, I had to write letters and then hope they got printed. So I know I would have been I'd have been the biggest troll. Oh my God. If I had had the access to do that. So I was with a grain of salt because my opinions, you know, I didn't know shit at 15. You know, I didn't know shit at 20. So I take it with a grain of salt. And, you know, anyone older than that with foul opinions, I can't help them. You know, I'm like, so all that to say is I try not to give them too much credence unless I secretly feel the criticism is warranted. And I've already, you know, no one's a bigger critic than yourself usually. You know what sucks if you did something and you're like, oh, that could be better. And yet it stings if someone else happens to notice it. But then you've already made the decision in your head not to do that the next time. But you also know the circumstances that led you to make that choice that probably didn't work out. So it's, you know, you cut yourself some slack and you just don't give it that much air. You know, you try not to let it guide your decisions too much. It's hard because you get stuff in your head. And again, people read stuff online and think it's a consensus and it's not really.
How about positive feedback or positive interactions or, you know?
We don't believe in those. Like, that's the thing. You know, I'm sure people have said, oh, it's the one nasty comment that sticks in your head. And you get people, again, and the other thing is you don't get the hordes of people raving about something with the same energy that you do people who hate stuff. Hate motivates. I hate that as a slogan. But, I mean, look at this country. Anyway,
oh, God.
You're not wrong.
Help.
Yeah.
So people who are motivated, people are motivated to criticize more than they're motivated to praise because they're satisfied. You know, if they like something, they're satisfied. They don't have anything more to say. Well, you know, that was as good as I wanted it to be or needed. So, you know, there you do get praise, but you know, again, you can't give either that much credit, especially online. I mean, you know, the thing, and even this is comparable, is that, you know, I get a lot of energy when I go on a panel, you know, back when I was doing Comic-Cons and stuff. And to be see a bunch of people, a sea of people like something you did, that's gratifying. But again, it's not a consensus, you know, as far as it just makes you feel good. You just have to go, you just know you're doing your best and criticism isn't going to kill you, especially if you don't read it. Oh,
that's a good perspective.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, do you have any dream projects or any specific aspirations within the animation or entertainment world you'd like to explore?
Actually retirement, but no.
Hell yeah.
I mean,
it's a great aspiration.
Yeah, that's the aspiration.
I mean, and maybe it's because coming from where I came from, doing what I did was so far beyond what I imagined I would have been capable of doing that I don't, I have no burning desire to do live action. I have no burning desire to work on a feature. I mean, I know what those entail, and I'm like, no, I've had it sweet. I mean, for me, for what little James, drawing in the basement when he was a kid had, 10-year-old me is full. Like, I'm like, now I want to work on some of the stuff that I didn't get to do, personally, because I was so driven and doing the stuff I did for the last 30 years. So, but before I completely sign off, let me think. No, I don't really have it. I can't think of it. Batman was my favorite character, and I've worked on 4 Batman shows, and I've done like 5 movies. So
that's a great spot to be in at this point in your life, to just say, like, hey, I did the things.
Yeah, you'd think I'd be happier. But...
Oh God.
That's so
have you seen the world?
I want to travel. I want to smell the flowers. I'm kind of like, okay, what's next? What would life be when you don't have that thing that used to validate you constantly? That's kind of where I'm at now. I'm like, what would I do for myself?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, and I don't know if everyone after a certain point gets to that stage. I don't know. Surely Scorsese hasn't. Not I'm comparing myself to him, but he's what, 80 something doing, and he's still making, movies that are too long.
Cranking.
Yeah. So, God bless him, but I'm that is not on my list.
Out of curiosity, is Batman still your favorite character?
God, I guess so. I mean, yeah. You'd think I'd be sick of him by now, and there was a point where I was getting there, but again, he has so many aspects to him. Like Brave and the Bold was a completely different tone from Batman the Animated Series, and then I did, these movies that were much more hard hitting and quote unquote gritty, and then I even got to do Adam West, 2 movies with Adam West before he passed away. You know what I mean? So I'm Batmaned out, even though the thing I'm working on now is a Batman project. But so I guess he must be my favorite. I don't know if he's my favorite as much as I know how to do it. Like I know different ways to attack the character that keep it fresh, and different angles that work that still keep it Batman. And so, yeah, I guess he is. I mean, I have other characters, but as far as the ones that pay, it's Batman.
Like, I like Batman because he pays my bills.
I mean, half of Hollywood could say that. But,
that's true.
Fair point.
And, I mean, look at DC Comics. Every other book's a Batman book. So
that's very, very true. So I'm curious, and obviously, you've had a very extensive career. Is there an anecdote that is either funny or impactful or memorable that you would like to share with us? Just anything from the whole expanse of it.
Well, 2. There's this is my first employer in animation. John McClanahan always said this. He said there's 5 right ways to do something and 1 million wrong ways. If you pick one of the 5 right ways, you're gold. Move on. And then the other one, a college professor told me, is if you wait till you think you're ready, you won't be ready. And those have guided me, pretty much most of my career. Where I've just I think about those things often when I come to a decision or a fork in the road or something where I'm like, ooh, this is scary. I don't know if this will work. And that creatively or, in life, those 2 quotes kind of help me kind of break through a log jam. If I'm paralyzed by a choice, I kind of use those as a way to break through the barrier.
I love that.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. You mentioned that you are currently working on a Batman project, but before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to plug? Do you want to? Can you talk about that project at all? Is that something you want to talk about?
I can't talk about it in specifics more than have been announced, but it's a show Bruce Timm developed. Basically, it's a Batman show. It's basically the Batman show that when they were developing Batman the Animated Series, it's a team effort, like I said earlier, and you go through, there's compromises and things. And so there's elements of BTAS that weren't exactly what he envisioned when they were developing that show. There were outside pressures that pushed that show in a certain direction. And this is the show that's more close to what he envisioned. So it's kind of BTAS adjacent. It's more like, I always call it, I've been calling it pre-BTAS kind of thing. It's not a direct sequel or a prequel. It's like a reimagined BTAS.
Cool.
Very cool.
So, yeah, we've had a lot of fun on it. Well, that's a dirty word, but it's a little harder, I think, because we don't have the same restrictions that BTAS had, because it was, on kids' TV in the afternoons. But we're not blowing people's heads off or anything either.
Rated R.
No, it's very, very much a soft PG-ish, I think. We'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, but yeah, so, and it's fun. It's got a lot more noir influence, I think, even than Beat has. Because I'm a huge fan of film noir.
Ugh, amazing.
You know, I love it, and so that's something I really wanted to bring to this. I mean, Bruce is too, but he brings more of a universal horror aesthetic, at least initially, and I was bringing more of the film noir. And Ed Brubaker, who was our co-producer, story editor, brought his own level of course, he's steeped in noir. So I think it's a unique show. I don't, we'll see how it goes and when it comes out. We haven't announced that yet. Well, I don't know, so I don't know when it's coming
Fair
out
enough.
yet.
Someday.
Some point in the
soon.
future.
Yes.
Yeah. In addition to that, if folks want to follow you online and stay up to date on your upcoming projects and whatever else you feel like you want to share with the public, where can they do that?
If I'm
Can
on,
they do that?
Yeah. Ooh, true. Can they? Do you want them to?
I'm sometimes on Twitter. I'm gonna call it Twitter.
Yes.
I won't call it anything else.
Correct.
I'll be honest.
Twitter.
The worst
And
branding decision made ever. It's fine.
I mean, I know I also called X, but I don't think that was the plan. So, J Animator. Oh shit! I don't even know my own handle. What? J Tucker Animator. I don't know. Actually, I don't know it by heart. Because you just log on and you don't even think about what your own name is. I'm not a great self-promoter, so I would just say, if you're interested, you can search my name and probably find me on Twitter somewhere.
And J Tucker Animator on Instagram. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay, that one I knew.
Nailed it.
But I'm not big on either. I'm not, because I don't promote stuff. I don't like. It's a lot of work doing social media.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm looking to retire. I don't need.
You're looking to travel. You're looking to smell the flowers.
I mean, then James, the next thing could be a travel, influencer. This could be.
Oh, yeah, you could do a vlog. I
would jump off a bridge. That sounds freaking horrible. I'm so glad I'm the age I am and missed all of that, and to have faint memories of what it was like before.
For the 4 times.
I'm like, wow, that's what it was like to be bored. I have a sense memory of when I didn't have constant visual and intellectual stimulation. I remember being bored.
I think we might be the last generation that our childhood was not electronic focused.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
On that horrifying note, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah.
It was really lovely to chat with you.
Well, thank you for having me, and the best of luck on your podcasting venture. And
Thank you.
And until next time, I'm Katie.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Zeki.
And this has been How the Fuck.